What's up, everybody? This is Alex Christoforou with the Duran, and I'm here with Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran.com, and today we're going to be talking about a new government in Spain. Alexander, thanks for joining me again today on the Duran News and Review. And a couple days ago, we discussed Italy and what was an EU technocrats coup d'etat in Italy by appointing a caretaker government against the wishes of the democratic vote in Italy. And all of a sudden now you have Spain, another EU country on the periphery, and they have sacked Rajoy, the current prime minister, who was one of the longest serving prime ministers in the EU. And he's been replaced by, correct me if I'm wrong, a left socialist or a popular socialist named Sanchez. So Alexander, explain to us what happened in Spain today.
Yes, I think it's interesting that you brought up Italy, because in some ways what has happened in Spain is almost the diametric opposite of what has happened in Italy. In Italy, what we saw was insurgent anti-EU parties being prevented from forming a government. In Spain, what has happened is Mr. Rajoy, who, as you correctly say, is one of the longest serving leaders in the European Union. He has been Prime Minister of Spain for a very long time. He's been a major figure in Spanish politics for a very long time. He has fallen as a result of a loss of confidence within the Spanish Parliament, as a result of a string of corruption scandals which have happened in Spain. Now, one can't speak of this as an anti-EU rebellion in Spain, but some of the parties which have voted against him, the party which supported the anti-confidence vote in Rajoy, Podemos, most certainly is one which one could compare perhaps to some extent with the Five Star Movement in Spain, in that it is also opposed to the austerity policies that the EU has supported in Spain and which Mr. Rajoy has implemented. However, the man who has been appointed Prime Minister, Mr. Sanchez, comes from the popular Socialist Party, which, to be very clear, is a social democratic party. It is also very much a part of the Spanish political establishment. Whether he will be able to consolidate his position remains to be seen.
So what does this mean now for the European Union? And put it in some context when compared to Italy or Greece or Portugal. We're seeing the periphery, as we rightly discussed in our discussion on Italy, the periphery is acting up again in the European Union, causing problems to what was once thought to be a solved situation. What does this mean for the European Union, and is there going to be a reaction from Brussels with this new government, or is it going to be business as usual?
I think Brussels is going to wait and see and be extremely careful and not involving itself too closely. But you're absolutely correct in saying that the European authorities had rather complacently assumed that the problem of Spain was out of control. Spain had faced a very severe debt crisis. It was forced into a very severe bailout. Ferocious austerity was imposed on Spain, but the Europeans considered what happened in Spain a success. And they saw in Mr. Rajoy's government the guarantor not just of stability in Spain, but also of the continuation of the loyal pro-EU policies with which he is associated. Now he is gone, all is in flux, and suddenly Spain, which had seemed a success story and very stable, looks so no longer, at just the same time when a political crisis in Italy continues to fester. So you're absolutely correct. The periphery, the southern European part of the EU, which has always looked more fragile, is suddenly looking very fragile indeed, with the two biggest countries in the Mediterranean, in southern Europe, in the EU's periphery, Italy and Spain, both experiencing crises simultaneously.
Alexander, how corrupt was the Rajoy government?
It's difficult for an outsider to say. The perception in Spain is that it was corrupt, and we've seen convictions, and it doesn't seem to be generally disputed. Also, I have to say, though, I think one of the problems with Mr. Rajoy is that he was not just seen as leading a corrupt government, he was seen as leading an increasingly out-of-touch government. When this debate happened, during which the no confidence vote was passed, Mr. Rajoy, instead of turning up and defending himself, spent time at a very expensive restaurant in Madrid. And of course, that creates a bad impression of an aloof, uninterested Prime Minister, not perhaps very concerned with the feelings of ordinary people in Spain who have been through a great deal. Southern Europe is more corrupt. Spain is probably less corrupt than Italy, where corruption is almost, if you like, the organizing principle of politics, or has been in the past. But nonetheless, I think most people would say that the political system in Spain has been pretty corrupt, and the party that Mr. Rajoy has been leading and the government which he has been leading has been caught being corrupt in that way.
Alexander, would it be a fair assessment to say, to make an assumption that leaders like Rajoy, who have been sitting in the chair, in that leadership chair for so long, and you rightly pointed out that he was, at a restaurant for 8 hours while all this vote was taking place to essentially oust him. You say that leaders like this are almost welcome the freedom that they get from kind of, just leaving the government and leaving all this pressure of EU austerity. And I mean, I'm sure it must be an extremely difficult position to be in, being prime minister of one of these periphery countries, along with the corruption and the internal difficulties, and you have the EU pressing down on you. It almost seems like these leaders are almost happy or relieved to kind of say, okay, someone new is coming in. I didn't break the country completely. Now I'm out, and this is someone else's problem to deal with. Is that a fair assessment to make?
I think it's actually a pretty good assessment to make. The problem with these leaders is that they are so circumscribed in what they can do because they have to carry out the wishes of the European Central Bank and of the European authorities. So they don't have the independence of action that prime ministers in a country like Spain, a proud country with a long history, might once have done. And that must make them ultimately very unhappy about much of what they have to do. In effect, Mr. Rajoy has acted not as a prime minister of Spain, but as an enforcer, and of an enforcer of policies imposed on Spain from outside. And if I can say, that not only has made him unpopular and his party unpopular, but going back to your earlier question, it probably also increases the temptation to corruption, because political leaders who are elected to office, who find that there is only so much that they can do, they must ask themselves, why am I here? If I can't really do very much, well, maybe what I should do is look after myself. And that, it seems, unfortunately, is what some of them have been doing. So, yes, to come back to your question, I suspect that Mr. Rajoy, at some level, probably does feel a certain sense of relief that he's able to put this all behind him and move on and retire and leave Mr. Sanchez to deal with Spain's profound economic problems, with the festering problem of Catalonia, where there is still a nationalist, independent-minded party in power, where Podemos in Spain as a whole remains a major challenge to the political establishment, and where realistically there doesn't seem to be a very clear way forward.
Will the Catalonia issue rise to the surface again? I mean, it was a big issue internationally. It died down a little. They were going after their leaders to extradite them back into Spain and press charges against them. It has died down though a little. Is it going to fester up again now under Sanchez's watch?
I think it might do, because whilst Rajoy was, as we said, an unpopular leader, a leader of a corrupt party, he was certainly there for a long time, and he was seen as a strong personality. Mr. Sanchez is completely untested, and though he is as opposed to Catalan independence as Mr. Rajoy is, one has to wonder whether he is quite as strong a position to take a strong line with Catalonia as Mr. Rajoy was, and it could be that some of the Catalan nationalists will now see a possible opening and start agitating more strongly than they had been doing previously over the last few months.
Alexander, let's get your crystal ball out again. What country is going to be next in this periphery shakeup? We have Italy, we have Spain. Is there another country that you foresee in the near future to act up again and be a thorn in Brussels' side? Or do you think it stops at Spain?
Well, first of all, no, I don't think it stops at Spain. And secondly, there are a lot of countries on the European periphery who look fragile. But I'm going to come back to the one country which I think looks most fragile of all, and where the political situation is extremely unstable below the surface, and where there is enormous amount of social disaffection, and that is Greece, a country which we both know very well. I think anybody who thinks that the situation in Greece has been resolved and that people there are happy with the situation is simply, that is simply the wrong view to take of Greece. And we have to have elections in Greece before very long. I think Mr. Tsipras is a discredited political leader. I don't think there is a vast amount of support for the conservative opposition that is likely to replace him. So it is possible that we could start to see growing instability in Greece as well. That seems to me to be the most fragile country at the moment. It is also a country which is particularly vulnerable if interest rates in Europe have to rise, or if there is a sudden loss of confidence in the European debt market. So we will see, we will have to look at Greece. But I think at the moment, Spain and Italy are going to fill our agenda because they are both such big countries. The problems are there are so profound, and to be absolutely clear, Italy and Spain are much bigger and more important countries than Greece.
And Draghi must be having a hell of a time keeping the fiscal instability and the banking instability in Italy and Spain under wraps. How long can Draghi keep things up?
I don't think he can keep it up for very long, because he's basically run a very, very easy monetary policy. We've had quantitative easing in the European Union. The Germans have never been happy with it. And we've had essentially zero interest rates. The Germans have not been happy with that either. At the same time, we see in the United States that the Federal Reserve Board is actually tightening monetary policy there, and interest rates are rising. So Mr. Draghi has been trying to run a policy that is going against the policies, the monetary policies that are the dominant ones around the world, and which is also controversial within Europe itself. So I think his room for maneuver is actually reducing, and I think the extent to which, given the extent to which he has already made enormous purchases of debt across the Eurozone, the extent to which he can continue to do that is very limited. So if we're looking at a crisis on the horizon, I think he's got very little ammunition left to deal with it.
All right. Well, that's I think it's a realistic viewpoint, even though it may be leaning a bit on the pessimistic side. But I think, Alexander, me and you both know that the EU, in the European Union, pessimism has kind of been built into the cake, so to speak. So
I'm afraid that's right.
Yeah, so we will see how the latest headache in what we call the European Union is dealt with, and that is Spain. Alexander Mercouris, thank you very much for giving us your insight on the recent news in Spain. Everybody watching this video, remember to subscribe by clicking the link down below and also pushing that notification bell so you can get more videos every time we push out a new program. Don't forget to visit Duran shop. Get yourself a t-shirt, get yourself a poster. We have a lot of good merchandise. And keep tuned for more programs that we're about to post on YouTube. Thank you very much. Take care.